Have you ever looked at the Home tab on the Excel ribbon and wondered as you go over to the right and you see AutoSum, well, what does AutoSum do besides add? And below that, what does fill do? Why would we need a fill button? And even more importantly, there's that clear button. Why would we need a special clear button? Well, those questions will be answered today. Hi, I'm Terry, one of the Consumer Technology Specialists for Mid-Continent Public Library, and let's clear up some mysteries as we get started with the AutoSum button. Our example today features a playoff series with two hockey teams, Team A and Team B, although these are real teams and real scores for some playoff series. And as we look at them, you can just kind of take a quick look and see that Team A was not playing up to its best potential, and Team B, well, really wanted to win. But we can come down to C10, and this is asking for a total, so it would be all the total scores for all 5 games. And we could even type equals C4 plus C5 plus C6 plus C7 plus C8, and even with just 5 scores, that gets kind of cumbersome after a while, and the larger the number of numbers that you need to type, the more chance you have of mistyping something and having an inaccurate answer. So for us today, rather than typing in all of those individual cells, we're going to go up to the editing group, and then in the top left, go to this button that looks like a fancy E or a Greek sigma, and it is called AutoSum. Actually, our tooltip here just says sum, but we'll click on that button, and it is going to try to add this equals sum, but notice that it has not only C4 where it's starting, but it wants to end at C9. Now, with this particular spreadsheet, it doesn't really matter that it's gone one extra row, but it could matter. So we're going to go up and make a correction here. So we're going to backspace out the 9 and put an 8 so that it's absolutely correct. And as we read this formula now, we want to sum, we want to total all of the cells C4 through C8. And we even have this nice little border that goes around the area that we want to add. Well, I'm going to go to the left of the formula bar and click the check mark to set that formula kind of into stone, into the spreadsheet. And it says, well, Team A scored a total of 8 points over 5 games. Then we'll go to Team B, and while we could use the fill handle, let's just do a little extra practice here. So with Team B, we'll go back up to our AutoSum button, click, and again, we get a proposed answer of equals sum, D4, which is correct, but it's also trying to go to D9. Now, since I have a blinking cursor here with D9, I'm just going to backspace out right here, and it kind of erased the whole thing. So I'm going to click and drag over D4 through D8 to get the range of cells that I want to use. And then I'm going to come up to the check mark to set that into my spreadsheet. And wow, that's more than twice the scoring possibilities. So Team B, a total of 17 to Team A's total of 8 points for 5 games. The next thing that we're asked to do is to come up with an average for the 5 games that each team played. And average is sort of interesting in that it takes 2 steps to create an average if you were to do this sort of with pencil and paper. So we would first of all add up all of the scores and come up with a total, which we really just did. And then we would take that total and divide it by the number of numbers, in this case the number of games. So for Team A, to find out the average number of points per game, we're going to take the total and divide it by the number of games, which is 5. But we don't have to remember any of those rules or the 2 steps that are involved, because we can simply use the AutoSum button click on the drop down and go to the second choice, which is average. Now when we click average, you'll notice that it definitely says equals average, which is the function, but then because functions look up and to the left to try to autofill the information, it is actually selecting C10 as a possibility, and that's not right. So we're going to backspace that out, and then we're going to click and drag over C4 through C8. Now we want the average of those games, and when we click the check mark, yes, 1.6 or about 1.5, whatever those are, hockey goals per team, per game. Now, let's also go to Team B and see what their average was per game. And again, we will go to our AutoSum, click the drop down, and select average. It has again looked up and found a number, so that's not what we want to use, although it's a possibility for some of the math that you might do. And we're going to click and drag over D4 through D8, and then I'm just going to press enter, which gives us then an average of almost 3.5 points per game as opposed to 1.5 points per game. So obviously Team B came to win. Now, the next option that you have with AutoSum is count numbers. And the count function is what you're really going to use here. Is sort of interesting in that it counts just numbers. It doesn't count blanks if you have blank cells. It doesn't count cells with text if they exist as well. So for our example, when we go up to the AutoSum button and we come down to count numbers, and again, sadly, it's going to pick the wrong cell, so we'll backspace out. But as I click and drag, I'm going to select C3 as well as the cells with numbers. So I've selected 6 cells this time, and I'll go to our check mark to set it into stone. And even though I selected 6 cells, it says there are only 5 with numbers. Now think about that. If you have some sort of column or row that has only numbers in it, and it might be model numbers, it might be employee numbers, but something that only has numbers, and then you say, as just kind of a summary, count numbers, and you end up with a different number than, say, the number of employees that you know you have, then you know that you've got a typo someplace. It could be that somebody has typed in a letter instead of a number. Somebody's left a cell blank, but whatever it is, that isn't correct. So count numbers can be a great troubleshooting tool if you decide to use it. Well, let's go over to D12 and count the numbers in column D as well. So we'll come back over to our AutoSum, count the numbers, and again, it's trying to find the numbers up above. It's not the ones we want to use. So we'll certainly correct that by getting rid of the proposed numbers, and we will click and drag. And again, I'm going to start with D3 and go through D8. So again, 6 cells, and I'll press enter. And so now it says, no, there were just 5 games, not 6. Well, occasionally you may have a large amount of numbers, and again, it could be in a row or a column, and you need to know the largest numbers. Now, when we only have 5 games, that's not too hard to figure out, but let's say that you have 100, or maybe it's even 1,000 numbers that you need to scroll through to look. The larger the amount of numbers that you need to scroll through, the more the chances are that you will actually just scroll right on past the largest number in that grouping. So if we use this particular function of max, the largest number, it's going to be much easier to get the correct answer. To do that, we'll go back up to our AutoSum and click max. And again, it's finding a range of numbers that we don't really want to use, so we'll backspace out of that. And then we'll click and drag over C4 through C8 again, and click on our check mark. And it shows that the number 3 is the largest amount of points that Team A was able to come up with. Then we'll come over to D13, and for Team B, let's do the same thing, a little more practice here. We'll click the drop down and we'll look for the maximum, the largest number again. And again, it's predicting the wrong set of cells. So we'll erase those, and then we'll come down and find those 5 game numbers. And I'm going to click on the check mark this time again. And my goodness, the largest number here was 6 as opposed to poor Team A, which only had 3. And it becomes just more and more obvious why Team B really won that series. Well, we could also then look at the minimum, the smallest number. And the same logic applies here, that if you have a large number of numbers and you're trying to scroll through to find the smallest one, you could very easily overlook it. So using a function of min can be a lifesaver. Well, let's come up to our AutoSum and the drop down and go to min. And it's predicted the wrong range again, but we will click and drag over the correct range of numbers. I'm just going to press enter, and yes, the lowest number in their games was game 5 with a 0, absolutely. And let's look at what Team B did, and the lowest score they got. We'll come back up to AutoSum, we'll go to min, and sadly it's predicted the wrong thing. Usually, actually, it predicts the correct range of numbers, but it's just how I've arranged our summaries down below. All right, so we'll click and drag over B4 through B8, press enter, and Team B did have a game where it only scored 1 point. The problem for Team A is that's the game where they scored 0. So even though Team B had a really low scoring game, it still won. And that is how you can use AutoSum to not only add and get totals, but you can also get averages, you can count numbers, you can find the largest number and the smallest number within a grouping of numbers. I've moved us to a new tab where now let's look at the fill button, which again for a lot of people is kind of a mystery. But let's say that we want to type a number here in A1, and I'm even going to press enter, but let's say that I want to copy that number down through A9. So I'll select A1, hold down my shift key and select all of those cells then as I click on A9. And then I can go to the fill down button, and it even has a down arrow here, but I'll click the drop down to show that I have options besides down, but we'll click down, and that easily I can copy numbers or text down a column. Well, what else could I do? Well, let's go to say C9, give us a little room here, type maybe another number, or again this could be text, and this time I want to copy up a column. And I think maybe even older versions of Excel copying up or to the sides wasn't as easy or maybe even feasible, but with our newer versions of Excel, I simply hold down my shift key, click on the top cell that I want to copy to, click, and I can fill up. Wow. Now what else can we do? Well, let's go to say A11 here. And this time I again want to copy something. I don't know, let's say that it's name. I may be making some sort of a form. And I think I want to click on the check mark here to kind of set that into stone. And then I'm going to select A11 through F11 by holding down my shift key as I click on F11. And I can come over to that fill button and fill to the right. And now I've very easily copied to the right. Well, if I can copy to the right, what do you bet I can copy to the left as well. So let's come down a little bit here and let's, I don't know, type in something else. Let's type in some more, let's type phone and put in the check mark. And lots of times this happens. You get over to a place and you go, oh darn, I should have done this many times before. So if I type phone, but I really meant for it to start in A13, I hold down my shift key and click on A13, and then I can simply come over to my fill button and fill to the left. And that works. It's really nice. It's simply a copy mechanism that works, but the fill button can also work similarly to the fill handle. So let's do something like this. Let's click in, say, H1, and let's type our 20 again. And maybe I then go to my fill, but I go to series. Well, my series is going to be in a column because I want it to go down. Linear is what I want it to do because I want it to actually step, so which is basically adding. If I select growth, it'll multiply by the step value. I can also then have it just sort of increment dates as well. So let's go with linear. And instead of a step value of 1, let's have it count by 5s. And then I can even define a stop value. So let's say I want to start at 20 and I want to end at 65. I click OK, and it fills in, without my even saying where the end point is, 20, and it counts by 5s all the way to 65. Well, this time let me type a number, and I'm going to go back and select it, and then the number of cells that I want to fill in, because I can create a stop just by defining how many cells I want to fill. And I'm going to come over to fill, and we'll do a series again. This time I definitely want to select columns. If I select rows, it would go to the right, but I don't really need to do that. Instead of linear, let's look at growth. So remember, that's going to multiply. So let's have it just multiply by 2, because that'll be kind of amazing as it is. And I don't need to put in a stop value because I've defined where this set of numbers is going to stop. And then I'll click OK, and I have now created another kind of series just by defining where they start, where they end, and the value of that series. Now we can also do the same kind of thing with a date. So let me put in a date, and we'll go back to fill down, and we're going to do this series, of course. And again, I'll do columns, and it just picks a date. And notice that on the right, now I can say, okay, I want to change the step value for the day or weekday, which is kind of intriguing, the month or the year. Well, in this case, I'm going to change the step value to 7. So we have 7 days in a week, so I should be able to start with this day and then find all of the successive, what is this, Monday, Tuesday, and weekend, Monday. And we can find all of the Mondays. And again, I could put in a stop value if I want to. Oh my goodness, let's put in 12/31/2021. I have no idea where that would end exactly, but let's find out. We'll click OK. And as I widen this out, yes, it goes into December, but it doesn't go past the end of the year, and it shows me all of the Mondays from now until the end of the year. There's one other feature of the fill button that you might want to use from time to time, although I think this would be kind of rare. So our example right now just shows that I have text and then a phone number in separate cells within the same column. And we could come up to our fill button here, and there is justify. Now, to fill justify, what you do is you make sure that the cells are wide enough to accommodate the combined information that's in those cells. And I'm a little concerned that maybe L isn't quite wide enough. And then I need to select both of those cells that I want to combine, come to the Fill button, come down to Justify, and it concatenates the text cell first, and then the cell that was in row 2 now has been moved up to row 1. That could save you time and energy, and it saves you from writing a concatenate kind of function if you're not familiar with that. Probably a rare instance, but you may find that very helpful as well from just time to time. I've moved to yet one more worksheet, and with this example we're going to look at that third button, the clear button. And so we're going to start off by typing something, let's say test, and then we decide that, this needs to have a yellow background behind it. It needs to be centered, it needs to be bold, maybe it even needs to have a different kind of font. Well, let's look at something that's big. Oh yeah, let's make it even bigger here. And then we decide, for whatever reason, that that is not what we really wanted to do. Well, what you can do is simply clear. And to do that, we're going to come over again to our editing group in that third button on the left. And this used to look kind of like the pink pearl erasers. Close enough now. Now it looks more like the end of a pencil. But we can click on it and we could clear all, which would remove the format and the contents. But let's look at, first of all, clear formats. And wow, we are back to just that plain word, no bold, no background, no anything that I added. It just simply has the word. Let's undo and let's go back to clear, and let's look at clear contents. And we could do that. Now this kept the yellow background, but it removed the contents, what I typed within the cell. Well, let's remove that. And then let's come back over and we could clear all. Now I'm going to predict that it's going to remove the contents and the formatting. Let's see if that's correct. Let's clear all. Yes, and it did in fact clear everything, both the text and the yellow background. Now let me come here to D1 and I'm going to type in a number. And 1, 2, 3, 4 seems pretty good. I'll press enter, and oh boy, this is something that happens in Excel. Generally it's with dates and even sometimes with percents, where someone has come in before you, they've typed something in a cell, and in this case, evidently in D1, they typed a date, and then that format gets stuck. And the problem is, even if they remove the contents, the formatting is still there. And so what I've done is, when I typed 1, 2, 3, 4, all I did was type in the text equivalent of a date. So the way Excel figures dates is 1, all by itself, is January 1st, 1900. That 1, 2, 3, 4 is 1,234 days from January 1st, 1900, which was, May 18th, 1903. Every date has its own numeric equivalent, and that's really how Excel can go in and subtract dates, and then you can figure out payroll and whatever you need to do when it comes to working with dates. But it's because behind the dates you have those numbers that are attached to them. So how do I get rid of this May 18th, 1903 when I wanted to type 1, 2, 3, 4? Well, this you'll use from time to time. You'll go to this pink pearl eraser and clear the format. And now I have the number that I wanted to put within that cell. To learn even more, visit our mymcpl.org/online learning page, where you will find some really great online resources, which include Universal Class, LinkedIn Learning, and Learning Express Library. Tune in each week as we introduce new videos on a variety of tech topics. You can find us at 1 o'clock on Wednesday and Friday and 2 o'clock on Tuesday. Be sure to find us on Facebook at MCPL 360, or if you prefer, be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at MCPLMO, where you can find our MCPL Consumer Technology Resources playlist.